Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the show. I am your host, the one and the only, Proud 4%er, where I take my time to help you, my viewers, think outside of the 96% Democratic black voting box. Today I will help you come to grips with the fact that the black community, which is you, my 96%ers, need to relinquish these disgusting black politicians and self-appointed black leaders and their lack of culpability for their various bad behaviors. This is a direct intervention by me, the Proud 4%er, to apprise you of the dire need to stop blindly following this self-appointed and self-aggrandized black community leadership, fueled by the likes of such people as Maxine Waters, Jesse Jackson, and Al Sharpton. Also on my short list are organizations such as the NAACP and the Urban League, just to mention a couple. In 2012, the black masses, 96% of you, are still subjugating yourselves by choice with these so self-placed leaders, and it is to your own detriment, because you want to believe in anything so badly that you are willing to choose evil over good, as long as it is black. By doing so, you allow these characters, under the guise of democracy and ultimately distorting democracy for their own ends. These black politicians and leaders are given immutable control over you, who see you as their personal herd of sheeple. All you 96%ers, once installed, these nefarious scoundrels are unmovable from their positions of power, because any controversy surrounding them, even if that controversy is entirely organic and takes place within the black community itself, can and will be easily blamed on racist forces outside of their control. By complicity, you then give those leaders a free pass, both within the black community and, by extension, the entire society at large. These black politicians and leaders knows that this sheeple herd mentality hamstrings whites from any attempt to effectively criticize or depose an immoral black leader. This, ironically, is the same thing that incubates these same black leaders and politicians from any criticism from their own black constituents. All of this provides incentive for those in power to behave poorly. After all, why would a leader have to behave morally if they aren't held fully accountable for their actions? Why would they have to behave morally and fairly if their own constituents don't care about their poor behavior? The first step that I want you 96%ers to ascertain, in order to overcome any perceived injustice that you may suffer or have suffered at the hands of society, is to begin boldly calling out these characters within the black community that behave badly. This goes for politicians, the black leaders, on down to the preachers and ministers that you know have behaved detrimentally to the community. Think about it, 96%ers. Don't you know the same thing that propels black politicians to degrade their domains and their constituents propels higher rates of criminality among blacks in general as well, especially black youth? If there is no accountability by the masses in the middle, again, you 96%ers, which should be the potential voices of reason, but instead acting just as relatively moral as these immoral leaders, and thereby with it, whites, then have absolutely no impact on the goings-on of the black community. This then becomes an extension of self-victimology, which is then an extension of white guilt. With this immoral debauchery, we indulge ourselves in self-destructive behaviors, individually and collectively, while taking extreme pleasure in blaming any and everyone, whether they be white, black, blue, yellow, or green. It doesn't matter, so long as our failures are attributed to someone else. But regardless of their guilt, whites and others are ultimately powerless to do anything about this situation. It is a black problem, 96%ers, that only blacks can solve, and as long as these black leaders perpetuate and use institutional racism as a scapegoat, they won't solve anything. Now, here is the news flash, my friends. These hucksters don't want to solve anything. Why? Because this is how they survive. They are race baiting, victim stating, community backstabbing leeches who need your suffering to fuel their importance and line their pockets and coffers by using you as an army of ready and willing soldiers on call at a moment's notice to show the powers that be that if it doesn't succumb to their demanded extortion, they shout, "Look what I've brought with me." 96%ers. That is you. The main force behind these leaders' power, be it the black politician, local or national, the leadership of the civil rights organizations, or the black community organizers, is to ensure that you continue to live life clothed in thin skin and to be the victim of everyone, no matter the color of the victimizer. If you think I am kidding, just ask someone like Justice Clarence Thomas, who, according to these bozos, is a racist, bigoted, bootlicking Uncle Tom, who sits in his Supreme Court high chair, deciding what nefarious decisions he can make each day to oppress the lives of his fellow black citizens. And look, because they have said it often enough, and have said it loud enough, the vast majority of you 96%ers believe it, because they've convinced you that you are somehow his victims. You're out there, and you know that it is the truth. But, dear friend, allow me to free you today. I am going to leave you with just one example of how this race card plays out on your supposedly behalf. I am sure you are quite familiar with the news stories around Ambassador Susan Rice and the controversy over her public statements regarding the 9/11 attack on our Benghazi consulate, resulting in the lives of 4 Americans. Rightly or wrongly, as to how she handled the situation is not the point I wish to make. It is just the backstory to my aforementioned immoral debauchery, which is highly infectious and spread profusely throughout the black community by the race-baiting provocators masquerading themselves as black politicians and leaders. Susan Rice, who happens to be black, on presenting the then details of the circumstances surrounding the embassy attack, having later faced with questions on the veracity of those statements and the degree to which they were repeatedly given to the American public by her for several weeks, fueled strong concerns from those on the right. You know, those evil Republicans, after conflicting details began to surface. So enough with the backstory. So then, after a Republican lawmaker said there was a new report that shows details how references to Al-Qaeda were removed from White House talking points on the U.S. consulate attack in Benghazi, is further evidence that the Obama administration tried to mislead the public about what actually happened. And because after these details materialized, Ambassador Rice continued to report the conflicting story, therefore questions about her judgment in such matter came into question as well by Republican representatives like John McCain, and in doing so referred to Ambassador Rice as being incompetent. My friends, that's all it took to unleash the race-baiting clowns. Sorry, I meant hounds. Here is what your black politicians hit the news talk show circuit with, because of course Susan Rice is after all a victim that needs to be rescued. The main perpetrator, to self-appoint, is Representative Jim Clyburn, who angrily began spewing, and I quote, these kinds of terms. Those of us, especially those of us who were born and raised in the South, we would hear these little words and phrases all of our lives, and we get insulted by them. Incompetent. Is he jerking at our strings? My friend, yours truly, the proud 4%er, is indeed old enough to recall some difficult times in this country, racially speaking, and the word incompetent, incompetent, was not on the list of. I can't believe they said that. I suppose Representative Clyburn has had some sleepless nights since this happened. He went on to say, that word certainly causes a big problem for me. I don't Like those words. Look, the only reason this huckster is making a racial mountain out of this political posturing molehill is again to reinforce in the mind of his rank and file sheeple that they are victims. The irony here is but typical of such characters. Clyburn himself criticized former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, a Republican. This is what he said regarding the former governor in 2011 on the Bill Press radio show. You know, Sarah Palin just can't seem to get it on any front. I think, intellectually, my friend, that opinion of Sarah Palin is the definition of incompetent. Do you get my drift? Do yourselves a huge favor and rip off those thin-skinned mental suits of armor which these unashamed hustlers of divide and conquer have adorned you with, and then begin to judge people by the true content of their character. Finally today, take heed that if you face every day of your life looking for those who can offend you, you will find it for certain. Start today by holding those in your own community accountable and to higher standards. Well, folks, that's all the time I have in this segment. As always, until we next meet, this again your host, the one and the only proud 4%er, providing you with the necessary tools to cut your way out of the 96% Democratic black voting box.